Labdien for the invitation, and Paldis. No, Labdien and Paldis for the invitation. That's the only two words I can speak somehow. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a great honor to be here in Riga. And I just like to talk a bit about not so much the gardens. You have to come or just invite me for a longer lecture, but about some projects we did and how we try to manage it against resistance from the publics or from the politicians. It's a saying from the Parkomaniac, Fürst Pückler Muskau, from the 19th century. He said, "The axe is the iron pencil of the landscape gardener." For centuries, the nobility and the upper classes could easily cut down trees, level hills, divert rivers, or transplant entire forests to realize their garden plans. Fortunately, there has been a change in awareness of how to deal with interventions in the landscape. There are headwinds from the populations, politicians, and the media. The disadvantage is that nature conservation often takes precedence over the protections of cultural property, and both camps are doggedly opposed to each other. I would like to use three examples to show how we were able to carry out three projects in the Herrenhauser Gardens that would have had great potential for resistance. But first, I'd like to speak just a very few words about the Herrenhauser Gardens, then the Grotto of Niki de Saint-Phal, the Berggarten Avenue, and the Garden Theatre in the Great Garden. This is the picture of the Herrenhauser Gardens. You can see there are three gardens altogether: the Baroque garden, the landscape garden with the big avenue in the middle, and in front, parts of the Berggarten, the botanical garden. And you can see it's only 3 kilometers away from the city center. So it's very close. It used to be a little summer residence, but now it's surrounded by the city of Hanover. City Hanover has about 550,000 inhabitants. This is the Grossen Garten, the Great Garden, the Georgian Garden, and the Berggarten. The Grossen Garten dates back to 1675, so it will be 350 years old in a few years. And it's the only large Baroque garden in Germany that has not been changed in its basic structure. So all the layers were still there now for this long time. And this great fountain was the highest fountain in Europe, perhaps in the world, with 35 meters in 1720. Now, with electricity, it's about 70 meters high. And we had a lot of illuminations in the evening, so you have to come and to see everything. And still there, and just the only building left was the gallery building from 1698. The palace itself was totally destroyed in the war and rebuilt 10 years ago. The Georgian Garden, a landscape garden of the middle of the 19th century, which is now a very busy park used by hundreds of thousands of people just for leisure and for to grill and to make sports and everything. But we still keep it as a historic landscape garden with this Georgian palais in the middle. See this bridge from the 1840. And it's diverted by the Herrenhausen Great Linden Avenue. 1,000 linden trees, 2 kilometers long, 4 rows, and they were totally renewed 50 years ago. The Berggarten is the botanical garden, also nearly 300 years old. And it's only 12 hectares large, but a lot of interesting special gardens like this iris garden, the steppe garden, or a very special plant now, 150 years old, the Zündel beech, a very interesting formed beech tree. And there's the world's species-rich orchid collection. We still have several thousand different species from all over the world. But this is only very few impressions of Herrenhausen, but you have to come. So this is my first about the Grotto of Niki de Saint-Phal. I just don't know whether you know Niki de Saint-Phal. It was one of the most important artists of the second half of the 20th century. In the 1970s, this is in the middle of the city, she set up 3 nanas. It's plump female figures who initially caused angry protest. You can understand 50 years ago, people were totally against it, big riots, but after a few years, they now loved it. And we just thought about, in the 1990s, just how perhaps can Niki de Saint-Phal do the grotto in Herrenhausen. The grotto itself is the oldest building. It's from 1679. It was a lot of decorations inside, but they were all removed 250 years ago. This was in the 1966. Was still there. It's just beside the palace. And you see, this was the grotto 1998. It was in a very bad condition. So it was renovated and kept, and we tried to persuade Niki de Saint-Phal to do something here. She was very pleased, and she did. And she came there in 1998 and looked at the whole thing. And so in one of the nights, you see, I was 25 years younger, she designed the grills of the grotto there. And a few years later, we built them. So these were designed in a restaurant, and then we built it. There were, due to her popularity in Hanover, there was no problems for the population to realize the project. They were very, very curious, and they wanted to have it. But of course, there was a big discussion with the monument preservation authorities as to whether these historic buildings could be equipped with modern art. We had, after this discussions, we said we have only one rough drawing from the 18th century, and we have nothing what it really was in there. So everything was destroyed 250 years ago. So we agreed with the experts that we should be allowed to insert modern interpretations wherever there are no reconstruction options in the garden based on the original plan. And this is what we do in Herrenhausen. If you really have very good original plans and the changes have no quality of its own, then we are allowed to reconstruct. But if not, we are allowed to just do new interpretations, but of course always look at the history and then interpret the new one with modern art or modern landscape architecture. So we did this grotto. There are the three rooms. This is the silver room, it's day and life. We have the blue room, it's night and cosmos. And in the middle, it's spirituality. So it completely looks different, but it's the theme was the theme was the life, man's life, the man's life, and if you go into the garden, you see in the parterre there's four seasons as well. Not only the 4 seasons of a year, but the 4 seasons of life, from youth to old. So it fits to the garden, and it was a huge success. We had this, it was easy to realize, and we did, of course, intensive PR, and it was no problem to increase the entrance fee for a limited period, just to finance the whole thing, and we called it Niki Thaler. So just like, and in the year after its opening in 2003, so it's 20 years ago, the number of visitors of the Great Garden doubled. So it was a huge success. And even today, the grotto is one of the visitors' attractions, especially for children. So this was the first one. The second, you can see this is the grotto in the evening. Even the grills, which are very special, but this was, the idea is just to see it, but doesn't disturb the garden at all. The second part in the Berggarten Avenue is a bit more complicated. You see this Berggarten Avenue in 2014. It's about 200 trees. And from these 200, there are still about 100 from the original planting in 1720s. So 300 years old. But they were in very bad conditions. And they have been cut or trimmed for 100 for 50 years. And so they were in very difficult condition. You can see they were all hollow. They were on the brick branches. It was dangerous that they could fall down. And so we decided to replant the whole avenue again, because they were at the end of their life. And so we had some experts just for insects and invertebrates, just to do whether there are problems. But they said, no, there are no animals inside. And so we got to the nursery and made 200 new plants. We just did several reports to the newspapers, to television, and we made several guided tours to the gardens, to the avenue, and told the people what we wanted to do, just to replant the whole thing and just to make a new avenue. And in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you can see the grandeur of this avenue again. And we had a survey, but over 90% of our guests, they were in favor for the renewal. So we had a lot of PR before. But shortly before the felling, we commissioned a second, I think this time a real expert, to examine the invertebrates and to be on the safe side. You can see he just looked in every tree, and he found something in every tree, not only very rare spiders, but also the remains of the hermit. The hermit, this beetle you can see here, has the highest protection status in Europe, and not only in Germany. We just talked about it. Here's the same. If you see an hermit, you can stop everything because the hermit. And people think it's so rare, but normally the thing is this hermit, the adult animal, only lives 3 to 5 weeks. Then they just lay their eggs in old hollow trees, which are normally dying but not dead. And then you can find anything, only perhaps just a wing or just a leg from this thing somewhere. And but they are quite often, especially on old hollow trees. So they need this. We call it mulch. It's just like peat, where the where the fungi just destroyed the tree. But the beetle is not harmful for the trees. They just eat this fungus. So this was the thing, and then of course the beetle saves the Linden Avenue. This was the thing. We just said, oh, okay, we just had to stop the whole thing. We couldn't replace it, and then we wanted to put these big branches away because it was so dangerous. They still grew, and they started just to fall down. And so, but the nature protection societies, they were so strict. They said, no, nothing. You don't touch it. You're even not allowed to touch it, because then you're just against the law, and then you just get to jail or whatever. I said, oops, what we do? So then we had to close. You see this grills over there. We had to close the avenue for several years, and even the mower drivers were not allowed to mow the lawn, because they had to concentrate on the lawn and not on the branches upon them. And so the Berufsgenossenschaft is the workers' society, or just not what it's called. The Berufsgenossenschaft, they said it was forbidden just to mow the lawn, so the whole thing overgrew. So what to do? They said, okay, it's in 10, 15 years all the trees will fall down, because you're not allowed to cut them anymore, and they grow and grow and grow, and then they break out, and then it's okay. And the beetle never just gets into dead trees, only into dying trees. If a tree falls down, he wouldn't lay one egg inside. So they said in 15 years the whole avenue is dead, and then you just can start to build a new one. We said, well, 15 years too long, perhaps since 20 years. So we started with a compromise. we said if we just fix the trunks, if we fix the trunks so that they can't fall down, are we allowed then to cut the branches, the strong branches? Because when we just fix these ones here, then these trunks, they will stay for 30 years. Not only for 15 years, but for 13 years. And in the trunks, still the beetle can lay their eggs. So this was the compromise. We just long discussions with them. And then the Nature Protection Society said, okay, this is the compromise. You just cut the branches, the long ones you can see here. And then just we put some nets above it, just no squirrels or others just get inside to take the eggs out of it. And then we were allowed to do this way, and we fixed the whole thing. You can see it looks funny. It looks really funny, and it costs several €100,000. But the end is, this was, we just put new lawn inside, and then we were allowed just to get into to walk through the avenue again. Otherwise, for 15 or 20 years, the whole thing would have been a great biotope, and a big part of the botanical garden would have been not for the visitors. So this was our thing, that we tried to do compromises just to make it accessible again. And I just got a very nice expression from the Electress Sophie. She was 300 years ago. She nearly became Queen of England, but she was the Electress of Hanover. And one of her saying was, "If you can't get what you love, you must love what you get." She said it about her husband, but then I said it about this hermit beetle. So just now I love the hermit beetles. If you don't get what you love, you must love what you get. So the third and last interesting project we did in the last years was the Garden Theatre, the restoration of the Garden Theatre. The Garden Theatre itself was the oldest, or the first and oldest garden theatre, real garden theatre in history. With it was with stage, with side stages, prosceniums, and amphitheatre part, and this is the amphitheatre thing, and was and it still was still there. Most of it was still there. All the constructions were still there, and so we wanted to restore it, because this is another masquerade. It was not only a theater, but it was a ballroom on several layers. And you can see on the stage the people just danced. They were playing cards there. They just got their drinks and everything. So it was a big festivities, and. But in the past centuries, or especially in the 1930s and the 1960s, they changed the thing. They changed it. You can see on I just don't have the pointer here, but you can see on the left, you can see this the former shape from the 1930s and 60s. It was just like a square part of the middle, and on the right side you can see this little orange thing. This was the part where you just got the main axis from east to west. So they changed it totally. Whoop, that's the wrong one. And you can see this is the original one, just an oval shape. And on the right, this is the axis was as big as the lawn. So this was what they changed. They made it just a simple open air theater, and it was only by the natural. Parts, just only by the hedges and by trees. The rest of the built things were still there. This was the stage in 2018. Looks quite good. The golden figures, they are made of lead, and from the former 28, there are still 90 from original state from 1691. So one of the few examples of these lead statues in Europe. And these trees on the stage were on the right place, but they were just cut in the box shape, which was not. They were normally overeat in the original one. And on the other side, these trees, they were just planted in the 1960s. They're totally wrong, on the wrong places. Still the box shape, and you can see this gallery building in the back. And this was, normally you just had to do just an axis just to see it, but it was planted so if in the summertime you just can't see this gallery building. So, and this is the round arch with a light platform. You can see the main east-west axis from the bell fountain, and it was so close you just can't see through. And we were lucky just to have a measurement plan from 1705, and this was especially and then we made some measurements on site, and it was very exact. Only 10 or 20 centimeters, or even only some millimeters was. So we said, okay, this was the state on 1705. So now we can do it again. We can try to get this garden theater back to the original state, because this changes they had no quality with this open air theater. And then it was about 15 years ago. We just did some models. You could see this with the plans as well. You can see how it used to be, these two things. And where is this? And I wanted to do it. It's about 15 years ago, but my former boss and just an artistic director in Herrenhausen who used the garden theater said, no, we just need these old open air theaters. We don't want to change. So then I put this idea into a drawer. Perhaps you have the same. I have a lot of ideas in my drawers, and sometimes if you just find the right time somewhere, you just open your drawer, and sometimes it could work. So my boss was gone, the artistic director was gone, and said, wow, I just try again. And open the drawer and try to do this project. And but this was the problems was, how can we convince the Hanoverians and all the others that this is such a good idea? 28 healthy 60-year-old linden trees, 400 meters of hornbeam hedges, to throw away and replant it. Cost about €500,000, and they just to convince that they think it's a good idea just to put it back, because for the normal people say, oh, it's green, everything is okay, where's the problem? So then we just did these models, and then we just 1.5 years before it started, we had a press conference with citizens, with politicians and the press, and just to show our plans. Even all the information about cutting the trees and everything, and very precise just about what's about. The Lord Mayor on the right, which was for the press, they said, okay, we make this and this and this, and then we just went into the garden theater and then showed the people what we wanted to do. And it was okay. It said, well, if you want to do it, and it's so important because this is the first real garden theater in garden history, and the only one in this way preserved. So it's unique in the world, and this was a thing what people just accepted. And so this was just in a tram television. They said back to the original, or just for the other ones, back to into the future. So there was no problems then. So this was 18 months before. And then in January 2020, we started. Whoosh. It really looks bad. It looks very bad. And you can see with this trees, there was 12 of the trees within 1.5 hours away. It was in the morning with the saws, just put all together. And yeah, this was the old theater orchestra pitch. It looks really bad. And our gardeners who were pruning the hedge or the trees just beside, they were horrified. Oh, what have you done? What have you done? Although we just always explained it before to our staff as well. but it was a bad thing. I said, okay, but now it's too late, just get through it. And then just a few months later in April, everything was renewed, the gravel was renewed, the trees were planted, and then the golden statues came. If you ever want to do just a new project, take golden statues. Golden statues are wonderful everywhere. It doesn't matter whether it was. This was the only thing that people was interested in. We just were copies from the 1970s, and we put them on the original place for the first time for 150 years. And then it was a big success. Just the press came, and then they said 8 figures for the gardens. You see, it's nothing about 12 cut trees or all the other things. Everything was wonderful, and it was a nice day with the sunshine in the springtime, in the middle of the was May 2020, just when Corona started. Was the first positive things they could do about. And then we did the second one in the February 21. This was the stage. And then you see the trees were planted. We did with these wooden things. We did put the hedges inside so that the wood might rot within 20 or 30 years, but it's good for the hornbeams in the beginning. And so you can see again, this is the 2019, and this is the difference in spring 21, just after the planting. Totally different view. It's much lighter, opener, and you can see between the trees and the hedges there is this 1 meter long free part where you just can look through. So it's not only just like a big hedge, but it's just so much lighter. And this is from spring 23, just only a few months ago. This is what it is now. And it shows this, but you have to do intensive public relations work in advance. This is what we did, always did, and don't hide anything. People will, especially the press, will just find it out. Open discussions with the opponents, so big discussions, but better, and justifiable compromises, just like with the Linden Avenue, they lead at least to good results. And my experience is that if all the details are known beforehand, the press reacts calmly. So there's no scandals are suspected. This was with the Linden in the Garden Theater. We just pronounced, okay, we now want to start the project, but because we had all the details 1.5 years before, they said, okay, you start, and they even didn't come, for God's sake. But this effort later saves major discussions, frustration, loss of trust in the public and politicians, and in the worst case, even the prevention of the project. So be active. Act so that you don't have to react later with much worse cards. And I wish you for Ebelshofer best success, and thank you very much for your attention.